Welcome to this tutorial on how to fill out UCI's Conflict of Interest form, or COI for short. The Conflict of Interest form must be completed whenever an employee-vendor relationship exists, namely when the supplier, vendor, payee, or subrecipient is one of the following: a current UC employee, a former UC employee who has been separated for less than 2 years, or if that individual has a near relative that is a UC employee. Near relative is defined as a spouse, child, sibling, parent-in-law, child-in-law, sibling-in-law, step-relative, or domestic partners. Please note that former employees who have been separated for more than 2 years do not need to complete the COI form. This COI form must be completed if UCI is providing any type of payment to a company or individual that qualifies for this type of relationship. For the purposes of this video, we will refer to suppliers, vendors, payees, and subrecipients as the supplier. Conflict of interest is typically identified when the supplier goes through the onboarding application in PaymentWorks. If conflict of interest applies, the supplier should receive a link to a DocuSign Power form in order to complete their portion of the form. The supplier will input the full legal name of their business or their own full legal name if the supplier is just an individual, as well as their email address in the supplier section. The supplier will also need to input the name and email of their contact in the requesting department. The supplier will be prompted to complete Section A of the COI form. For question 1, the supplier will fill in the name of the individual in their company who meets the criteria of employee-vendor relationship. The various criteria are listed as A through F. The supplier will write the letter or letters of the listed criteria that best meets the situation. The supplier will also need to input their phone number. For question 2, the supplier will select the box that corresponds to the criteria they had selected in question 1. If the supplier is a current UC employee, they will need to specify which campus and department they are employed in, as well as their job title. The supplier will indicate if their position includes teaching or research responsibilities by marking yes or no. They will also need to provide a brief description of their duties at UC. If any additional space is needed, the supplier can attach an additional sheet by clicking this paperclip icon. If they are a former UC employee that has been separated for less than 2 years, they will need to specify their former UC campus, department, job title, and date of separation. If the supplier has a near relative that is a current UC employee, the supplier will fill out the name of their relative who is a UC employee, their relationship to that relative, and the relative's UC campus and department. The supplier will need to indicate if their near relative's employee position at UC includes teaching or research responsibilities. For question 3, if the supplier is a former or current employee, they will need to answer whether they had a part in any of their department's decision-making process and whether any university time, material, equipment, or facilities were spent in connection with the proposed transaction. A supplier that is a former employee within 2 years of separation will also need to answer if they were in a policy-making position in the same general area of the proposed transaction. If the supplier has a relative who is a current UC employee, they will need to answer if that relative had any influence or involvement in the department's decision-making process. If the supplier answers yes to any of these questions, they will need to provide elaboration on how they or their near relative was involved. If any additional space is needed, the supplier can attach an additional sheet by clicking this paperclip icon. For question 4, the supplier will provide a description of the goods and/or services they will be providing. If additional space is needed, the supplier can attach an additional sheet by clicking this paperclip icon. For question 5, the supplier will click on this sign icon in order to sign the document. Once the supplier section, Section A, is completed, the supplier will click the Finish button. DocuSign will route the document to the email the supplier entered on the UCI department section when initiating this form. Once the supplier completes Section A, the department will now need to complete Section B. The department will need to answer if the goods and/or services are available from UCI's own departments and facilities, if the goods and/or services have already been provided to UC, and if these goods and/or services are available from other providers. The department will also need to fill in the expected amount that will be paid to the supplier. If the amount has not been finalized, please input the maximum expected amount. The department will also need to explain why this specific supplier was chosen. If any additional space is needed, the department can attach an additional sheet by clicking this paperclip icon. The department will also need to provide the first and last name, job title, and email address of the person who chose to use this supplier. The department chair or supervisor will click on this sign icon in order to sign the document. Once the department section, Section B, is completed, the department will click the Finish button. DocuSign will route the document to Procurement Services. Procurement will complete Section C once the COI form is received. If the form is approved, it will automatically be routed to the vendor coordinator to complete the supplier onboarding process.